Hey there, comic fans! Michael here at Ground Zero, giving you the weekly lowdown on what's new and exciting in the world of comics. And as with most weeks lately, the answer to that question is largely Batman. But we found a few things that aren't Bat titles that are interesting to talk about this week, and if you're anything like me, you always relish when there is something cool coming out in comics that doesn't have bat ears anywhere on the cover. That being said, they're still doing some cool stuff with Batman, starting off with Batman Urban Legends. The fourth issue is hitting the stands now. Obviously, Dave and I have been singing the praises of this series since it first dropped, and they made me very, very happy this issue. They've had the Grifter backup story that's been going on in this, and they've reintroduced one of his old Wildcats teammates, Zealot, which made my Wildcats fanboy heart very happy. She's in her original 90s outfit and everything. It's great. You should pick it up and dig through the bins and find some old Wildcats issues. They're not good, but I love them. Then also with Bad Ears on the cover, we have DC's Pride special featuring a big chunk of my favorite DC characters, from Kate Kane Batwoman to Renee Montoya as the Question, who really needs her own ongoing series, or at least a succession of miniseries or something. We get little crumbs of her as the Question. She guest starred in the Lois Lane miniseries that came out was that just last year? Time isn't real anymore. And then there was the Convergence 2-issue series. Aside from that, we have hardly seen her at all. So we get a little bit more of Renee Montoya's Question. That's great. I'm always here for that. We get the Future State Flash. We get a Harley and Ivy story. We get Apollo and Midnighter. We get Alan Scott. It's the cream of the LGBT crop in DC. Great characters, great writers and artists working on these. I was really impressed by some of the choices that they made there. Then also in the Bat lineup, we have the second issue of Future State Gotham. The first issue of this book was divisive, to say the least, but I really like the decision they made to make this a more manga-style art book. I think that it really makes it kind of stand out from the rest of the very extensive line of Bat books at this point. Should they still have charged $3.99 for a standard page count book that's in black and white? Maybe not. But the book itself is cool, and I think you should give it a shot. It stood out for me amongst the morass of Bat books that they're putting out these days. Another book that we have hyped endlessly on this channel is Geiger. The third issue is releasing this week. Dribbling out just a little bit more of that post-apocalyptic superhero story that we're really looking forward to seeing resolved in any significant way, but it looks really pretty while doling out those little bits of story. Also a book that is taking its sweet time getting anywhere is Rorschach, which I am not reading because I am waiting for the hardcover, because all my Watchmen stuff is in hardcover, and so I really wish Tom King would hurry up and finish this book so I can read it, because I hear it's excellent. Everybody who is reading this has told me it's awesome, and I am just beside myself wanting to get caught up on it. So anyways, issue number 9 is out. You should all buy it to encourage Tom King to put them out more quickly so that I can get to reading it. Then trades and hardcovers. We have a really cool week for that kind of stuff. I was actually just on the phone with Danny from Valiant Comics earlier today. We were discussing how the industry is really moving towards bigger chunks of comics, bigger trades, more expensive trades. People aren't minding that near as much anymore. People are really getting into that binge mindset, and there's some really great examples of that today. Starting with one that is not that, but Kirby Manga Mania is out. This is a sort of a greatest hits compilation of some stories from the Japanese Kirby manga series that ran for a very long time. But I really, really encourage people to support this for one extremely selfish reason. The same manga artist who did this Kirby series, and mind you, I'm excited about the Kirby series. I love me some Kirby games. But the same manga artist who did this also did a Bonk manga series. There's like 3 people out there that know what I'm talking about when I say Bonk, the video game character. But I would just be over the moon if somehow this sold enough copies that then Viz decided, hey, we're gonna also release his Bonk stuff, even though nobody remembers that character. It would make me extremely happy, and it's incredibly unlikely, I'll grant you. But if it happens, I'll be talking about it on this channel. Then moving on from extremely selfish and unlikely desires, we have our last Bat book of the day, I promise, sort of. In Batman Earth 1 Volume 3, it's been, probably about 8 years since Jeff Johns and Gary Frank's first volume of Batman Earth 1 came out, so they are certainly taking their time on it. But it is an excellent story. It's an excellent reimagining of the Batman character. Sorry, I got somebody pulling on the door. He has done some really cool things thus far with reimagining the mythos. I love Gary Frank's redesign of the costume in these books. So, it's a long time coming, and I definitely think people will have no problem giving that a shot. Moving on to some of those big, thick chunks that I was talking about, Marvel's Epic collections have been kind of on fire lately. Most of the time, we haven't been able to keep them in stock. So it's very noteworthy that this reprint of the first volume of Hulk stories is hitting the stands. We've got a fair amount of copies of it. And this is it's all 6 of the original Lee and Kirby issues. It's all of his appearances early on in Avengers and SpiderMan and Tales to Astonish and all that kind of stuff. Which, honestly, as much as I like to give Stan Lee a bunch of crap, this is great stuff. This is obviously formative stuff for the Marvel Universe. This is stuff that every serious comic fan needs to be familiar with and needs to have in their library in some form. Similarly, a new reprint of, they're still calling it Marvel Masterworks. It's in an extremely different format now, but a new small format trade collecting the first 10 issues of Amazing Spider-Man and then the Amazing Fantasy 15 stories. So the first 11 Spider-Man stories at a very cheap price. This thing is only $15.99. If you somehow have gotten this far in your life without reading Stan Lee and Steve Ditko's original Spider-Man stories, here is where you start. This is great, great stuff. That arguably got greater later on. Spider-Man was early enough that a lot of the early stories are a little bit clunkier, but man, once it gets going, the original run of Spider-Man is some of the best comics out there. And I mean, this is where it all started. This is, the introduction of the Vulture and Doc Ock and the Lizard and so many of those classic villains and stuff. Moving on to something a little bit more current, some of you may have been flipping through Netflix recently and seen a bizarre-looking new show about animal hybrid kids or something. Well, believe it or not, it's based on a comic. Sweet Tooth was originally released 2006 or so. I may be completely off in that. Again, time isn't real anymore. But is one of Jeff Lemire's crowning achievements as a comic creator. Did it for Vertigo in the waning days of when Vertigo was actually, unfortunately, a relevant brand at DC. And the new one actually doesn't have that branding. Oh, no, it has Black Label branding because all the Vertigo stuff is being rebranded to Black Label now. But this compendium for Sweet Tooth has the entire shebang in one book. It was not a tremendously long series, and so this is all of it. This is beginning to end the entirety of Gus and Jeopard's story. So if you caught the Netflix show and you're wanting more, if you're wanting to see how it all turns out for them, you can get it all at once right now. It's great. It is definitely a favorite of mine. I have not watched the show yet, but I'm looking forward to doing so and kind of comparing and contrasting because I have loved this book for years. It is one of my wife's absolute favorites. And then last trade that I wanted to talk about today is not strictly a Bat book, but it does have a Bat person on the cover. Tales from the Dark Multiverse 2. Who'd have thought that DC doing all these, dark alternate universe stories would have ended up proving to be so popular? I mean, me, and Dave and, well, a lot of the other people who come in here that, you know, keep saying, hey, when's DC going to start doing those Elseworlds books again? Those were amazing. Well, they finally listened to us. They're just not calling them Elseworlds anymore. But these books have been really, really cool what-if stories covering all the different, you know, big crossover events from DC's history. This one has Flashpoint, War of the Gods, Crisis on Infinite Earths, and even as recently as Dark Knight's Metal. So an alternate take on, you know, what if things had gone really badly at the end of that storyline. So very cool stuff, available in hardcover now. Last thing that I want to talk about today is we have Batman Fortnite 0 Point second printings on the shelf. Number 1, number 2, and number 4. Number 3 was also supposed to ship this week. We don't know what happened. It wasn't in with stuff, so maybe it'll show up next week or the week after. Who knows? Keep checking back here. We'll post it whenever we have them. But if you have been sorely lacking in Batman video game crossover books and needing those sweet, sweet codes to import into your game, we have you covered, at least for a limited time, until these also run out. Demand on this book has been absolutely nutso. And then also in the second printings front, Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters Alpha has gotten a second print. So we've got a few more of those in for if you missed it the first time around. That is all the major stuff for this week. As per usual, this stuff will go on sale at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. We will see you then, and until then, keep reading comics.